Hi, welcome to Free Failing. My name is Jenny Fraze, and this is the podcast where we talk about things that make us feel weird or isolated and try to connect with other people about those said things in an effort to show that we're not all quite as terminally unique as we think we are. Today, we're talking to my good friend Meghan Williams. Meghan is a returning guest to the pod. She's one of my best friends. She is an aspiring harpist, a longtime writer, a meditation teacher, a yoga instructor, and just very magical and brings just a wonderful energy to this conversation. We are today talking about being child free and single, especially being women over a certain age, and the stigma that comes with that just from society and why it's an important conversation. More and more people, men and women, are choosing not to have children. And there's still just a large subset of society that responds to that choice with pity and shame. And I just think it's time to change that narrative up and make this more of a common conversation because it's happening more and more for a variety of reasons, which we'll get into in this conversation. All the stats from today are in the show notes. This episode does go a little bit long, and in true Jenny and Meghan fashion, we tend to get off topic a little bit, but I think all the roads that we take in the conversation ultimately lead us back to the underlying issue of being child-free and or single as a woman is wildly stigmatized. You can follow me on Instagram at freefailing. And if you have your own story that you want to share, shoot me an email. My email is jen.freefailing@gmail.com. And otherwise, please enjoy the Child Free by Choice episode. Today, we're going to talk about a stigma we're very familiar with, and that is the stigma of being 30-ish, 40-ish. I guess we'll both disclose our age, and unmarried and or single,
Oh,
certainly with no children.
the shame.
How could we have allowed ourselves to get to this terrible place
I feel like I should do this in
in
disguise.
our
So nobody.
life? Oh, so shameful that we do not have 2.5 children and a white picket fence.
Yes.
So let's run through some stats really quick before we start chatting. The numbers are going up of people like us. 44% of non-parents age 18 to 49 in the US say they are unlikely to ever have children. That's from a Pew Research survey in 2021. And there's a wide range of reasons for that. So medical was one of the number ones, medical and financial.
Okay, that makes sense,
There
especially given the current economic climate.
100%. Right. It's from 2021. So that makes sense, right? Because people
Yeah,
were like,
yeah.
just, yeah. And their age or their partner's age is relatable to me. And then the state of the world is something that people cite a lot. Environmental reasons like climate
Yeah,
change, things like that. They just aren't really interested in bringing children into the party.
that
Um,
was my last boyfriend. That was his reason for not wanting to have kids because he didn't want to bring a child into the world the way it is now.
right. Yes. And I see that a lot on social and things like that. 50%, this is from the US Census Bureau, 50% of all US adults are single. For the purpose of that survey, single meant unmarried, divorced, or widowed. So that's 127 million unmarried people. It's a
I
lot of
feel so much better
Yeah.
now already. I'm so glad you invited me
I felt
on.
better reading it. I had to source
No,
it.
really.
I had
Yeah, it's
I had
helpful.
to source it from like 3 different places because I was like, "Really? Like that's a lot of people." But I
And
mean,
it never feels that way,
I
though.
know.
It always feels like you are terminally unique and you are the only one
Totally.
that is without child, without husband,
100%.
without normalcy. Normalcy.
Right. So this leads me to my first question, which is, are Well, first of all, are you comfortable disclosing your age?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm 44.
Okay, I'm 44 too, for the folks. So,
And for all of you who think that we don't look 44, make sure you post that in the comments because it's really helpful for us to hear that.
I mean, I'll take all the external validation. I don't care. I'm not, no shame at all.
No,
Um,
none.
okay. And so in your extended friend group, do you know other people without children in our age group?
I now know one person who is without child, but she's married and they chose not to have children.
Okay.
But everybody, no, I'm sorry. I know two people who are married without children. One of them, she wanted children, but her husband at the time had a terminal diagnosis. And so it was not something that
Right.
was,
Sure.
a feasible option for them. And now she's remarried, but she's on the upper side of 40. So it's
Right.
not, kind of missed her window. The other girl that I know, she has been married for 20 years and they just knew at the very beginning they did not want to have children.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they said, according to her, they continue to reaffirm that fact. Like she said, they were at nephew's birthday party the other day and he was just turning 2 years old and there were like thousands of screaming children all over the place. Her husband literally pulled her outside and was like, I just want you to know that I'm very happy with our life choices.
Yes. There is no other birth control than a 2-year-old's birthday party. I'm gonna say a whole bunch of things through this that I'm not supposed to say, and I don't care. Okay, so I also know two people.
Okay.
One person is childless by choice. She's a little bit younger than us, but she is partnered, and her partner have no interest in having children. They have a very fulfilling life. I think she's been to maybe like 30 different countries over this time of over the
Wow.
span that I've known her. Yeah, she's very well-rounded and really uh really fulfilled. Um
Wow. She should give lessons. Good
yeah,
for her.
she's great. Did you, cuz I did. I sort of thought when I was in my 20s maybe that once I like got it together, I would definitely have kids, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just curious if how kind of how your narrative went, if you felt that way, and then as the like 20, 30, 40s decades have gone on, how you felt that it changing, if it did or not. I don't,
Mhm.
however
Mhm.
that went for you.
When I was younger, I always felt like I wanted children. And the irony of it is, when I was growing up, that was very much an expectation that was placed on
Right.
me by my mother, both very intentionally and even subliminally a little bit. Like we, go out. I think we went to a doctor's appointment one time, and my doctor was like, "Oh, her muscular structure at this age is so well defined. Like she could be an athlete, she could be this, that." And my mom was like, "Oh, no, no. This is her lifetime to get married and have babies." And so I had this
Wow.
narrative running in my head like this. And she had said this multiple times to different, like she would just kind of answer that question for me. And so I don't really feel like I was ever at choice point with it, so to speak. It was always kind of an underlying expectation.
Wow.
And then when I was like 26, I was with my boyfriend at the time, and his mom and I were out at, if for those of you that are from Texas, you might know this very, very East Texas like event that they have called First Monday. And it's this big antique fest. I mean, women show up in gloves digging through like antique silverware trying to find all of their pieces. And so
Wow.
she and I were there, and she introduced me to one of the vendors that she knew. She said, "Oh, this is my daughter-in-law." And she's like, "Oh my God, why did I say that?" And she was like, "Well, it's about to happen anyways." And I was like, I couldn't breathe. Like I
Hello,
was like
911.
about to have a panic attack.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, what is going on with me? So, we get home, and then I do what any normal 27, 5, 6 year old would do at that stage. I go to the bar to contemplate
Obviously.
why I had this awful reaction.
Obviously.
Obviously, because alcohol helps you clarify everything.
Like nobody's business.
And so what I decided is that at that stage in my life, I had already been so responsible in so many ways for my mom that I never really felt like I had a life of my own.
Right.
And the thought of having someone else that depended on me was just a very unmanageable experience for me at that
Interesting.
time.
Right.
And so I just figured I'd get there eventually, but I just knew I wasn't there now. And then when I was in my late 30s, my boyfriend and I did try to have children, and we weren't able to. And the relationship kind of dissolved shortly after that. And I just never really had the opportunity again. I had so many people that were like, well, if you want a child, you should just go and get IVF. But that was one of my hard no's. Like, I do not want to be a single mom raising a child, because I went through that and I know how challenging that is. And I really, if I was going to go down that path, I wanted my child to have a stable family unit.
Right. You mean by went through that, you mean as the daughter of a single
As
parent.
the
Yeah.
as the parent, yeah. If I was going to choose to bring a
Right.
child into the world, I wanted to bring a child into a very solid, stable family and
Right.
not have to go through all of the stuff that I went through on the flip side of that.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Gosh, our stories are really quite similar, except I don't really know if I had so much of the pressure, like, to have kids. I mean, one thing is that my siblings are our ages are spread out. So my older sister's 12 years older than me. So by the time I was in like a serious relationship in my 20s, my older sister wasn't having kids, right? So I did start feeling pressure, but what I
Yeah.
really remember is when I decided not to have kids. I was already with my ex-husband, we were already living together, and we decided he was, 9 years older than me, and in the beginning, we thought maybe and I don't really know how it happened. We sort of just grew together, and over the course of a few years, we traveled a little bit, and we just were enjoying our life. Here's a better way to describe it. I didn't 100% wanna have children, and I coming from a mom, which I felt like she wasn't really 100% invested in my
Uh-huh.
childhood, and that's a very generous statement. I wanted to make sure that I was 100, right? And anything less, and I felt like I probably shouldn't do it then. I'm probably gonna do it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
ultimately we just decided, no, but anyway, I remember specifically being on the phone with my mom and my mom wailing, not crying, but like, "But you always said you would and that you wanted to," and it was like this whole guilt thing, and
Yeah.
it's, like, seared into my memory, like, where I was sitting during the phone call, you know? And this was way before boundaries, of course, like, your
Yeah.
story perfectly same thing. Like, I didn't know
Yeah.
to say, "I'm not living my life for you personally," like,
Yeah.
surprise.
This
Um
actually is my
right,
decision.
like, shocking news. But yeah, but I do remember there was a lot of guilt from her associated with that decision. I guess I get it because I hear people on other podcasts or wherever who talk about how joyous it is to be a grandparent and how it's so much different from having your own parents. So, like, I understand that maybe you really want that for yourself, but
Well, I also think that there's just a level of it's so ingrained in society's projection of normalcy for people to have babies and keep reproducing and evolving the species, that when that doesn't happen, I think not only do we feel failure, but our parents probably feel that way too.
oh,
Like,
that's
well,
such a
why
good
didn't you
point.
raise them right?
That's such a
You
good
know?
point, right? What's wrong with her?
You do? Why
Yeah,
didn't you tell her how important this was? Like, how
totally.
did you misparent her to get her to this stage where she doesn't want to do that? And so I think there's just a lot of shame on both sides of the equation. And I mean, I blame Disney.
Honestly, on and the Hallmark Channel and all
And the
the
Hallmark
other
Channel.
right.
Yeah, I mean, when we were growing up, There was
Blame Disney.
nothing on TV. There was nothing in any of our shows that we watched that normalized that experience for
Right.
us. Every show, every sitcom. I mean, maybe towards the time we were like 12, 13, then, oh, well, let's have shows with single parents, let's kind
Right.
of but before it wasn't even a thing. And so I feel like both sides of the equation have a little bit of contraction around that because it's just not normal. And if it's not normal, it must be wrong, right?
Yeah, and that I mean, again, going back to, like, I didn't really think about it from the standpoint of, "Hey, how did you, like, mess your kid up so bad that their priorities are so incorrect from a like, society standpoint?" And when I thought about having kids, I was in a wildly toxic relationship. I'm ultimately really glad that that relationship did not produce children because it would not have been a good life for me, for them, for the partner,
Mm-hmm.
for anyone. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
ultimately glad it worked out that way. But I think, yeah, going back to the society expectation, have you heard or been told, like, what are some of the things that people have told you? Like, for example, I heard a lot because, like, I would bartend. And so people would always ask me, like, as I'm like meeting people or whatever, oh my gosh, you don't have kids? Like, well, you will. You'll want to. You'll change your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, I think that narrative is changing, but, like, do you relate to that? Do people have people said that to you? Do people still say that to you? Or what are
I always feel like the energy I get, emotion I get from people most often is a little bit of pity. Like, oh, wow, we feel so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Right,
That's,
right,
and I don't know if that's me projecting. I can't validate that in any way, shape, or form,
right, right,
obviously,
right,
but
right,
that does feel like what, because, they talk and everybody, exchanging pleasantries
right.
and, then all of a sudden, oh, well, do you have kids? No. Then,
Word.
oh,
It's like the mic, like, record scratch, mic drop.
yeah,
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 right,
all it,
totally,
yeah. And it just, I mean, the tone just completely changes,
right.
and then just as a very, sensitive individual that picks up on that stuff pretty
Sure.
easily, that
It
reinforces
does.
my, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong.
Wrong. Yep.
Clearly, I'm doing something wrong.
Right, right,
So,
and
but again, I don't think it's necessarily anything they're even conscious of. I just think it's so programmed in our psyche that that is what normal is.
totally.
I mean, it's a biological
It
urge.
is.
I don't, the people I know that don't have children, including myself,
Mhm.
I think everyone went through the phase where they felt like they needed to, or they wanted to, or
For
they were
sure,
supposed to,
for
or
sure.
let's just try because we don't want to miss out on it. There is so many levels of that ingrained in the human species just from an evolution perspective, that I think it never passes through anyone's consciousness as normal.
Right, no one's saying it to be hurtful, it's just the
Mm-mm.
norm, and I think that that's a really good point that you say about, like, oh, missing out on things, because I'm very happy with my current life. If somebody were to now at this stage give me like a, "Oh, sad face, how," I would probably say, "Don't feel bad for me, I love time and money." You know what I mean? I love free
Yeah,
time and I love my,
yeah,
like, I don't know, it's
yeah,
okay, I'm doing
yeah,
alright.
yeah.
But on the flip side, I know that there's a lot of really amazing organic moments and days and things that
Oh,
happen with children, and
yeah,
so that
yeah,
makes,
yeah.
I would say, holidays a little bit, like, I'm really sensitive too, and I sort of can feel things other people are feeling, so I do see a lot of, like, really special moments because people do
Mhm,
share a lot more special moments than we didn't used to
mhm.
have, like, a front row seat to people's, like, Christmas morning, right? And so now we do, and it's like, of course, that's super special, and I see people take their kids to Disneyland for the first time, and I remember
Mhm.
going to Disneyland for the first time or whatever it is, so it's like, yes, I do really enjoy my life at this stage, and Oh, I would love to make an Easter basket for a little mini me or whatever and
Yeah. Yeah.
experience things like that. But that's what our nieces and nephews, even through our friend circle or biological or whatever,
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
for. And the one person that I know that doesn't have children by choice is like an extremely active person in her friends' kids' lives. I know that you are too, because you're close
Uh-huh.
to our, some of our best friends with children. So I do hope that that whole shame pity party upon hearing that starts to drop down, and I think it will, because I think that Gen Z is gonna be one of our first generations that we start to see that doesn't follow the normal.
Yeah. And
Right,
I mean, I honestly feel like the narrative should be wow, like, thank you. Thank you for blazing a trail because it's not easy. There's a lot about that experience of being so different and always, wondering, well, maybe I am missing out on something. Maybe,
right,
there's a lot about that is challenging. And, for people that either chose not to have children or couldn't have children or whatever the case may be, they are blazing a trail for all the people to walk this
right,
path in a manner that is much more comfortable in the future. And it's not an easy thing to do. So I feel like when someone says that, there should be an element of like, oh, that's courageous. Good for you.
right.
Like, however it shows up for you. I appreciate you, doing that so that my daughter has an option and it doesn't
Exactly.
seem like a forced experience
Right.
for her.
So she has role models to look at and
Yeah.
say she's doing just great with whatever her pursuit is, even though it doesn't involve children. So, less on the part of having children and more on the part of being single. How do you feel about living alone and being single? Like, broad question, but like
Mhm. Let me put it this way. I would rather be in no relationship than be in a bad relationship.
right.
So I mean, my preference, obviously, I would love to have someone to do life. That sounds like fun to me.
Yeah,
I would love to have that opportunity,
sure.
but I want it to be because it's a healthy and fulfilling and evolutionary experience for both of us, not because I just don't want to be alone. Right. I mean,
Yeah. Do you
I
think
there's an element of that which I also will be very clear and truthful about the fact that I have a tremendous amount of compassion around the people that are having this challenge because I fully understand it. It's not easy being single.
right.
It's not easy being alone.
Right, right,
It's not
right.
easy not having someone to mirror experience back to you and create that
Right,
level of safety and
right.
validation. But it's also can be very dangerous and detrimental to both parties to be in a relationship just because you don't want to be alone.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you think that you've become or had a little bit more acceptance around that as you've become more self-aware, like, as you've done
yeah.
work and gotten older?
Oh, for
Me
sure.
too.
I mean, it requires again blazing a trail. It requires a tremendous amount of initiative and courage,
Right.
in my opinion, to go and create a sustainable life for yourself as a single
For
person.
sure.
Like, go to ballet classes,
Right,
take harp lessons,
right,
do things that fulfill you. And so you're not depending on someone else to fill that bucket for you. And then when you do get in a relationship, you both have the capacity to be self sufficient. And so you can really enjoy that
right.
partnership
Your 2
from a
holes.
place of just desire to be together versus need,
Right,
right?
versus, "Hey, I'm counting on you to make me happy. I
Right,
wasn't happy living alone,
right,
so now I'm gonna live with you," and I hope that that, like, sums it up and ties it up with a nice little bow. And,
right.
yeah, like, back to the ballet lessons and the harp lessons, that was, like, one of the things that I figured out. So, like, in my mid-30s, like, right after we decided not to have kids, I started taking horseback riding lessons
Oh, so
because I had
cool.
always wanted to, and it was really, really fun. It was really hard. It was really fun, and, I've kinda dabbled in a few things, like, over COVID, I started, like, getting back into photography, and I made this mental health blog, and now I'm doing this
When you
podcast,
started playing guitar.
and I'm, like, learning how to golf right now, even though that's going very slowly and is really, really hard, but I just think that these are good examples of A, things we would not probably be able to do with kids,
Right.
or things that we can like do comfortably on our own, which just help nurture that individuality, that self-validation, that
Mhm.
self-awareness, so that when, like you said, are in a partnership, it's like two, because I've been in that relationship where I'm like, listen, on the
Yeah.
weekends, we're gonna do things together because like you're my source of
Yeah.
all of it. Tick it off,
Yeah.
validation, entertainment, all. So, yeah, so I think that is a really healthy way to look at living alone, and plus it's just a magical time.
It
My
is. I
cousin
mean,
told me that one time. Living by like, do never take living by yourself for granted. It is a magical time,
it is
and it
magical, and
is.
I also feel like it's for some people, I feel like it's necessary. I feel like some people require more autonomy than other people. Like, I will say, of all the relationships that I know about and that are successful, they are successful because they have space,
Yeah.
right? There's an element of space in that relationship that makes it a very manageable experience for both parties, because nobody likes being overshadowed and nobody likes feeling like they're responsible for someone else's experience
Yeah.
of life. And
Right.
so I feel like the space creates a lot of opportunity for expansion versus no space. And there's always just an element of contraction.
Right.
And I also think that for people that, and I kind of put you and I both
Mhm.
in this bucket, and I hope you don't mind me
Sure.
speaking for you,
Oh, no,
but
that's fine.
people that had formative years that were challenging, that created an element of low self-esteem and lack of self-sufficiency and lack, capacity to self-soothe and all the things. I think that those people, they need the opportunity to do that for themselves, to be a whole, and functional human being. It's a blessing to be able to find your way through that
Right.
and get on the other side of it, and then just have the grace that comes from knowing that you can do it on your own.
I couldn't agree more. It's the most empowering thing I've ever done for myself,
Yeah,
hands down, and the hardest. And the hardest.
for
Like
sure.
those
Yeah.
first few 6 months, year, it's like panic attack inducing hard.
Oh my.
It's so
Yeah.
hard.
And then you're looking at it's like comparative suffering all the time, because you're looking at all your friends and social media and you're
Right.
like, I'm the only one. I
Right.
know it.
And I make that joke all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it. It's like the Instagram problem of happy plaid families, which
Yeah.
no shade to anybody in their photo shoot. I've been in a happy plaid family photo shoot. I get it. But it is a very small snapshot window but that's all we see. And so it is
That's all we
hard when you
see.
are that person home alone with your cat or home alone with your dog or whatever it
Yeah.
is. It's just huge FOMO is what it is. I must be
Yeah.
missing out
Oh yeah.
because,
Yeah.
and we talked about this before, how like wedding culture is getting pretty out of control, but I will be very honest and say that Instagram weddings give me a lot of FOMO, and that's it working. That's how it's exactly
Yeah.
how it's supposed to work. Like you're supposed to feel
Yeah.
that way. And going back to the kids thing, when you were talking about the congratulatory alternative to, hey, I don't have children. Good for you. Way to blaze a trail, right? And I think that that also speaks to I'm trying to break the generational trauma that has been
Yeah.
prevalent in my own history, great
Yeah.
grandparents, grandparents, parents, right? And
Yeah.
I uh, I think that it does speak to someone's strength, and it's not a moment for like, don't feel sorry for me. I
Yeah.
had all this work
Yeah.
to do on myself. This is the kind of upbringing that I had. I did not want to bring that into another
Right.
human so that they
Right.
would then have to also break their own
Right.
cycle.
Right. And if you're the one that chooses to end the generational trauma, that's a lot of generational trauma you are personally moving through. So it's going to be a
Right.
pretty uncomfortable experience in order to neutralize all that charge that has existed in your lineage for generations.
What a
Like
good
it
way to
all
put it.
ends with you. So you're holding all of it. So you have to move through it, work through it,
Yeah.
and neutralize it, And so there's a lot of grace in it's not a path that's meant for everyone, obviously. And, it has its own challenges that come with it, but it's definitely not a path to be pitied, by
I
any
mean,
shape or form.
seriously,
Yeah.
seriously. And I do
Yeah.
hope that that initial reaction starts phasing out. So this is again, here we go with I'm going to say something I'm not supposed to say, but 90%, 95% of everyone I know with kids has at some point in a roundabout or very direct way told me, "You're so lucky you didn't have kids."
Yeah.
N
Yeah.
with and, like, my ex used to go, like, weekly, and he would play basketball with all of his friends, and every single one of them had children, and all of them were wildly jealous, openly. They would just be like, "I can't believe you just don't have to, like, go ho" like, I get it that it's a lot more challenging when kids are young and stuff, and that I mean, I'm not here, not judging, I'm not right, but I think that there is an element where like, I was looking it up earlier, how many pregnancies are unintentional? Unintentional. It's about half.
Mhm.
It's about half. Half of people are out there, like, specifically trying to make this type of life for themselves, and 50% are like, "Oh, hey, we're gonna have this type of life, I guess." You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
here's a stick. I guess this is what's happening for the next 20 years. I should clarify that the 50%, I think it was like 44%. I'm gonna have all the statistics in the show notes, but it also does include, like, victims of sexual assault and,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
things like that, but it's a high number. There's 2 reasons I decided, like, late 20s, early 30s. I was sort of deciding not to I was, like, sort of leaning farther away from, I definitely want to have kids because 'cause I've been told my whole life that's what I'm supposed to do, and 2 things really moved my needle. One was I'm an older sister. My little sister's 3 years younger than me. We were really close growing up, and so
Mhm.
we both got to be drinking age, and we would go to bars, and I would just, like, glue her to my side, you know? And I just started to realize, like, I really, it was fear. I was so frightened by how much love and just how terrifying it was, the thought of something happening to her, that made me start to think, I don't think I'm capable or have the capacity or the desire to love another human in this maternal way and then be responsible for just have my whole heart walking outside of my body for like a few 3, 4 decades. Like I
Yeah.
don't think I have that capacity.
And that
Um
is what it's like. I mean, I've
and we
heard
see it,
mothers say that, yeah, that it really is like having your heart live outside of you.
right. I
And I
I
can't,
see
I
it.
mean, yeah,
Yeah, we
that's
see it with
that's
our friends. I
yeah,
definitely see it with a lot of my friends,
yeah.
and the other reason is going to be a little bit more like, I don't know if controversial is the right word, and maybe we'll cut this, but this was a really strong reason for me. So, in my 20s, I was in a 5-year toxic relationship, and by toxic, I mean wildly abusive. And that person I watched him put his parents through, like, literal hell, way
Mhm.
long after even I left. It's not my story to tell, so I won't say, but I always reflected on that as I got further and further away from that relationship because for all intents and purposes, this person had, like, supportive and loving parents. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, one of the parents traveled a lot and what
Mhm.
but for the most part, especially from, like, my lens, I'm like, "You had it good, dude." Like,
Yeah.
"You had it
Yeah.
good."
Yeah.
And, I mean, I hate to just say that it all is all based out of fear, but again, I was really terrified, like, that you can do everything
And it
all the
can
way right,
still, yeah.
and,
Yeah.
like, you could still wind up, like,
Yeah.
needing to put up cameras in your own home so your kid doesn't steal from you and, like,
Yeah.
go I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. It's so true. It is so true. You never know. You never know. And I feel like that's also was one of my challenges around children, not necessarily in that same capacity, but my mom and I have a very, very close relationship. It's actually no stretch of the imagination to say it's probably too close in some ways. You know, there's a lot of enmeshment going on there, and we have our own challenges that we have to
Sure.
deal with when it comes to that. But I feel like my expectation around my relationship with my children was very skewed as far as it showing up exactly like I was expecting a child that showed up for me the way I showed up for my mom.
Oh my gosh. Excellent point.
And so what would I do if I didn't get that, right? And
Right.
there was a very authentic, truthful part of me that knew that I would not handle that very well. You
Yeah,
know,
that's
that
such a good point.
that's my
Yeah.
baseline. That's my foundation. That's
Yeah.
what I view as a normal child mother daughter, mother son relationship. And if that did not show up in that same way, which just by universal principle, because I had an expectation for it to show up that way,
Right.
it probably would not. Right.
Right.
And so that would be a very tough pill for me to swallow. And I didn't know how well I'd do that.
Yeah. Right. That's a really good point.
Even all of this self awareness around all the reasons why I was probably on some level okay with not having children, I still have gone through periods where I just felt like it's almost like I felt like I was doing something wrong by not doing it.
Me too.
You know, our girlfriends here can attest to this. Just recently, you know, I have gone through this with them where I don't know, I feel like somehow I did something wrong or I'm not worthy or all these emotions around why could it possibly not be meant for me to have a little child to love? And one of our friends was very kind to point out the fact that maybe it wouldn't turn out that way, you know? And that's
Right.
where that was my first, like, oh my God. I never even, because in my mind, the whole time I'm thinking they would love me the way I love my mom and I would
Right,
love
right,
them
right.
the way that,
Yeah.
you know, and this is like, yes, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And then someone was like, well, it might not be that way. And
It's a
how well would
whole
you do with that?
it's a
And it was
whole
like,
independent, yeah.
oh yeah, I don't think I'd do well with that at all.
No, it's a whole human with their own personality and their own, yeah. I imagine you've heard this before because I definitely have a lot heard, "Well, who's gonna take care of you? Aren't you worried
Yes.
that
Who's going
as
to
you
take care of you?
who's gonna take care of you?"
It's a very good
And
question.
when I right, and when I first started going to therapy in, like, 2013, I ran that by my therapist. So my therapist at the time was a mom of 3 boys who were adults. Her response to that was, "I would never put my kids in a position to take care of me." Now, for
Wow.
reference, she was really talking about more like in the case where we were discussing it in therapy, she was talking about financially.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of dynamics and layers in relationships and especially child parent relationships.
Yep.
But that was always really powerful for me to hear because I think that there is a societal expectation that
Yeah.
as a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, you as a fully formed adult with your own family, probably in whatever capacity your family looks like, are going to put your whole life on hold
Mhm.
and start caring for your parents.
And there's actually cultures where that is the expectation.
There is, right.
That that is what they do.
And I read a lot. I'm in the aging parents subreddit because I was in there for many years before my dad passed away, just trying to get some sense of like connection and relatability. Like, this is so hard. Is it this hard for everyone else? Oh my gosh. And a lot of people say it's incredibly difficult to balance that and that they kind of wish that they weren't in the position of having to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
And it is, right.
Yeah.
I don't really know where I'm going with that except to say that I don't think that that reason can be the reason.
Yeah, no, and it's not fair for it to be
It's
the
not
reason.
fair.
I
It's
mean,
not fair at all.
that's a lot of expectation to put on a little human being that that hasn't even come into being yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also think that a lot of times it doesn't even happen. I mean, there are plenty of people out there. I have my landlady is 86 years old and she's got kids and neither one of them take care of her. There's plenty of people out there that have had children that, like you just gave the example, regardless if it was
Oh, yeah.
a steady, safe, loving household, there's not that reciprocation for whatever reason. I don't want to speak for other people, but I think there is a strong tendency
Yeah.
to run on the assumption that having children will make your old age easier on you, right?
Right.
Which, again, not a fair expectation. And also, in some cases, not even a realistic one.
Yeah. No, I agree. It kind of goes into that same boat of like parents trying to live out their dreams through their children.
Mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm.
"Oh, hey, you're not interested in singing and dancing, but too bad. That's what you're gonna do for 10 years because I was supposed to do that and
Yeah,
I missed my calling,"
yeah,
and that's definitely so there's a lot of that going on too.
yeah. But I do also think that there's a magic with children that you really can't get anywhere else. It's just
Yeah.
magical,
It
and
is
I
that's the
think
best
that
word for it.
I feel like that's the reason to have them, right? Because
Right.
you want to hold space for that magic and let it
Yeah,
grow and let it
for sure.
manifest into all that it can be and more, right?
Yeah.
But I also think too, that the women that do not have children. There's a lot of women out there that just don't really have that maternal instinct. But for some women that have that maternal instinct and that for whatever reason is not their path, I mean, to your point, there's other ways to do it.
Oh,
We
yeah,
do it
definitely.
our friends' kids, through our pets, through our parents, I mean, there's lots of different ways to love and nurture. And, it doesn't mean that just because you don't have your own little mini to do it with, that you can't find other avenues to make that happen,
For sure. You
you
have more
know?
time to be part of your community, present with
Yeah.
your neighbors,
Mentor
present
kids
with
and
yeah, everything. Yeah, I'll going to the magic thing. So I could not agree more. And one of our mutual friends I was visiting like a long time ago. I was either like going through a breakup or maybe I had just got divorced. I'm trying to remember how old she was. But anyway, I was asleep in the guest room and it was like 4:30 or 5 in the morning or something, and I, like, woke up for no reason. Like, I must have heard something or for whatever, and I just, like, opened my eyes, and my friend's daughter was just standing in the guest room just kinda looking at me, but, like, not in a it didn't scare
not in
me
a
or
creepy.
anything.
Yeah.
Just it didn't scare me or anything. She was just kinda looking at me, and she said something. She, like, reached out to, like, hold my hand or something, and she was like, something like, "Are you okay?" Like, or "Are you sad?" Or just, like, something like that, and,
So magic.
like, I
Yeah.
barely really even knew her at that point, but I do gravitate towards her. She's, like, maybe, like, my I don't wanna call favorites, but anyway, it really showed me a different level of, like, energy
Yeah.
and how in tune especially, like, little kids, I think there's some spot between, like, 3 and 7 where they're just, like,
Yeah.
magic. I know
Yeah,
we keep
it is.
saying that word,
It's
but there's
totally
really no
magic.
other word, and I always remember that that happened, and
I know. There was this one time, one of our other friends, not the friend that you're talking about, because I know which one you're talking about.
100%.
One of our other friends, she was having, like, I guess it was Christmas or Thanksgiving. We went over to her house, and this is when her daughter was still pretty young. And her daughter and I had this very just strong connection. We
Right.
always have. And so I walked in and she just was like, Megan, and she just ran up and hugged me. And everybody's like, well, why don't we get this
Right.
kind of, greeting?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have never felt so special in my entire life.
Right.
I was like, oh my
Right.
God, and
Right.
then, just having that, there's nothing that gives you that kind of fullness as
Yeah.
having like another little innocent, beautiful, magical being that comes to you for comfort and
Right.
just attention and love. I mean,
Sure.
it just makes
And
your
they
heart
trust you. They
explode.
trust
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
That's major, yeah.
yeah.
I know when and that's how we, like, wind up spoiling them to pieces because
Well,
we're
that's
like,
our job.
"What do you want? Just take it. I don't
Yeah,
care. I just have it." Like, "Go in my closet. I don't whatever
yeah.
it is, just go in there."
Yeah, and it's fun.
Um,
I mean, this same little
it's so
girl
fun.
just went to her first Taylor Swift concert, and
Right.
her mom isn't like a super blingy girl. And so I was like, okay, we're gonna bring you some bling. So I like got my Kendra Scott earrings and all this stuff and brought them
Nice.
over to her. She
Oh,
was
how
so
cute.
excited.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah. And so
They
there's a magic with children. And of course, it's not always this way. We're
Of
looking
course.
at it from the
No, of
outside of
course.
the
Right.
equation. I'm sure
Sure,
there's
sure,
plenty of
sure.
times they're not magical at all.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like any woman that has a natural maternal instinct, it would just be very weird if she didn't go through that
Sure.
experience of, well, maybe I should, maybe I don't know, I'm missing it. I mean, there's such a draw to it, a
Yeah.
natural gravitational pull to it because it is so magical.
Yeah. I've definitely known people who, like, since they were, like, 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever, like, "I'm gonna be a mom," right? That's
Oh,
their whole
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
and they
and
would
they're
write there, they already knew their kids'
They
names, like, that
did,
was
yep.
never me. I
That
was
was
never
never me
that
either.
person.
Nope. I was
But
more
yeah,
like writing my name and then my last name with, like, the boy in class
yeah,
who's, like, I had a crush on, I was more like writing that
yeah.
over and over, but never,
Oh, you
like
know what? That reminds me. I feel like this is a good point too. This is something that my therapist helped me with because I was having a lot of trouble recently with not having children and not really feeling like I 1000% made that choice, right?
yeah,
I feel like it was kind of a choice
made
that
for you.
that's how it worked out.
Yeah.
But what she helped me understand as well that I thought was very helpful is my bottom line when it came to starting a family, kind of like what I said in the beginning was I wanted it to be a family unit. I wanted, a husband or a partner that was going to be very present and emotionally available and be able to provide a level of security and stability
Right.
that I never had,
Right, right, right.
from my father growing up, right? And so there's this element of, she even said, she's like, there are plenty of people that will go out there and have kids just because they want to have a child. That's all they want. They don't want anything more than that. You want a child and a very healthy, stable family unit to bring them into
Right.
the world through. And so she was like, this is not a choice that is being made for you. This is a choice you're making. She's like, I'm assuming you could have had plenty of opportunities to have children. And it's true, I could have. I could have had children probably 4 or 5 times at this point.
Same, same.
And I had plenty of people. I was blessed enough to have people that were wanting to go down that path with me, but I didn't feel like it was a sustainable option for
Right.
me long term. And I didn't want to do that to the child. And so she helped me reframe my experience of the victimization that tends to come with I wasn't able to have children
Yeah.
and show me that this was actually very much a choice that I continued to make year
Right.
after year after year throughout all
Right.
the opportunities I had dating in my childbearing years. I mean, 44, technically, you still could, but I don't know if I could physically, emotionally, energetically go through all the things that it takes to
Oh
have
god,
a
no.
child at this point.
100% no. I mean, no. Good for your therapist.
Yeah, no, so I feel
It's
like
really
that
just
was very
yeah.
helpful,
Right.
and
It's like reframing. It really kinda comes back to negative self-talk,
right.
right?
When it comes to having to deal with this stigma, and it is very much still a
Big
stigma,
time. Big time.
really helpful to have conversations about it. Talk to people, but talk to your friends,
Yeah.
talk to your therapist. Like, it's important to give that a voice because it's not easy. It's very hard. And there
Yeah.
are a lot of emotions and feelings that can very easily and often come with it.
Adding to that, there's a lot of child-free accounts on Instagram
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
really inspirational, that are really like connective, very
Yeah.
like helpful. If you
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
somebody who is in your late 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it is, you and your partner have decided to remain child free, there's a lot of support out there. And honestly, it's just being unmarried and or being child free is completely gaining traction. People are
Yeah.
starting to figure out, I don't want to say like the jig is up, but like people are starting to figure out it's not like the 50s white picket fence dream that we have had it
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we've
Exactly.
had been led to believe that it is. And I think we've all learned that through our own shared experiences, and certainly my experiences of watching my friends who are a lot of the times really struggling. It's really hard work.
It
It's
is hard
really,
work.
really hard work. They
And
think
it's hard
prob
work to be alone too. I mean, there's no easy path, right?
totally. Yeah, right. No, one is not just because you don't take one route doesn't make it a picnic compared to
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, but to that point, there's meetup groups too. Like I'm part of a
Right.
meetup group that's like the 1 in 7 or the 1 in 5. I can't remember the stat, like one
Oh,
in five
cool.
women are not able to have
Yeah.
children. And,
Right.
so there is a lot of emotional support out there because for someone, if you're on the fence at all, it's probably not ever going to be an easy
For
decision.
sure. For
It's still
sure.
a choice, but it doesn't, it's not necessarily an easy one. And so it is helpful to hold space for that and have other
I
people that
agree.
will hold space for you.
I agree. All right. Well, I've taken up so much of your Saturday. Thank you for talking to me today. That was a really good conversation.
Yeah, this is always so much fun.
Thanks for listening. And Megan, thanks for being here. And we will talk soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.